بسم الله الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. Okay. It's been a while. I feel like it's been a while since I spoke to a gathering of sisters. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward the sisters for having these gatherings, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward every one of you for coming out of your comfort and your home for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to either learn something or be reminded about something for His sake and for our benefit in this life and in the hereafter, inshallah. Okay, so the topic I was asked to talk about today was the struggle against the self, or the jihad of the nafs. And I'm not sitting here because I've conquered my nafs, just putting it out there, right? I'm not sitting here talking to you because I've conquered mine. But subhanallah, I hope to benefit myself and my family and anybody else that is coming together for this reminder by gathering this information and sharing it with you, and reminding myself of this information as well, inshallah ta'ala. So let's dive in. Originally, Sister Sumaya said to me, the talk is 25 minutes, and I went, I don't even think I can, tell half a story in 25 minutes. And then she kindly accepted to give me about an hour. So let's see how we go, inshallah. All right. So I usually give a little bit of an outline so you can see where we're heading with the talk and what I've covered here. So I like definitions. I think they're important. We'll give some quick definitions around the term nafs, some states of nafs or types of nafs. A little bit of a discussion around why we fall into sin, or why we are sometimes overpowered by our nafs. I also thought it was important just to be reminded about some of the major sins in Islam. A little bit of a discussion about how we form habits, particularly bad habits and addictions. What are some common bad habits and addictions that afflict human beings these days? It's good to have a look at those. We might fall into some of them. And how we conquer our nafs, inshallah. And then hopefully a little bit of time for questions. Usually we go over. That's usually my style. I don't think it's boring though. Just to don't get scared. So the nafs. The nafs, when you look into this term, it's a very elusive term. It's not that easy to, and often is the case with Arabic, it's not that easy to just take a term in Arabic and go, oh, it means this, and give an English term that's the equivalent. It's really not that easy. And Arabic, particularly classical Arabic, it's a very rich language and it's very deep. Sometimes we need multiple words in English to try and come close to the meaning of that word in Arabic. So the nafs, often people will translate it as the self, sometimes the soul. And there's an example here of where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the term nafs in the Quran as in yourself, nafsika. So, and remember your Lord inside yourself. So nafs, I'm going to try and help us all get closer to the tangible meaning. When we think of nafs, I always do little quizzes on my children at home, or my husband when I'm researching a topic, and I go, hey, what does this mean? And they give me all sorts of answers, and I go, no, that's wrong. And one of the questions I asked them today was, what is the meaning of nafs? And I got answers like, it means your desires. It means, what answer would you have given, by the way? Yeah, like nafs means your desires. Would that have been the equivalent, or how you would translate it? Yeah? Ashika? Yeah? Okay. So it's an element of that, right? And I'll show you in a minute. Hopefully I can, bi'idhnillah, with the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I can show you how difficult it is to define this term. So yes, it encompasses this, aspect of ourselves where we have desire, where we have emotions, we have passions, we have lust, we have anger, greed, etc. It encompasses that. Then there's another term in Arabic, ruh, which also comes close to nafs in the sense that it's not our physical being, right? We, as human beings, we're composed of the body and the soul. And subhanAllah, in the Quran and in the Sunnah, the word nafs and the word ruh are sometimes used interchangeably. They're sometimes used to mean the same thing, but are they the same thing? And this is a debate or a discussion that's quite deep among our scholars. In some cases, some, I guess, I won't say schools of thought because that's not the right reference, but some scholars would say that they're synonymous. They're the same thing. Ruh or nafs is the soul, and we have the body, right? Whereas others will distinguish that if you think about the ruh or the soul, the spirit of the human being, where this term is predominantly used in the Quran and in the Sunnah is when, the soul enters the body. You think about when the ruh enters the human being, at what point? When the child is developing in the mother's embryo, right? And then the ruh it enters the body. And when we die, when the ruh is taken out of the human body, right? But nafs is most frequently used when we refer to not our physical person, but our soul, our self, while it resides in the body, where it is connected to the body, where it plays a role in what we do in terms of those triggers, our desires, our senses, etc., and the decisions we make. So I think I've summarized something here. Oh no, I'll just go back one second. I thought I wrote it down. So the term ruh generally refers to the spiritual entity inside our body that leaves the body when we die. So when the soul leaves the body, we consider the human being to have passed away. Medically, a human body could be kept alive without the soul, right? And subhanAllah, in my lifetime, particularly as a teacher, I've seen students who've passed away, maybe drowned, maybe had different issues, and they've been physically alive and doctors and nurses standing there saying, but we don't know if they're dead or not, technically, right? And for us as Muslims, has the soul departed from the body? Breathing apparatus, whatever it is, can keep a body alive, but are they there? And what do we mean by that? Is the person still there? Is the ruh, is the soul still connected to the body? Will that person, wake up and be present? So the nafs and the ruh, sometimes used interchangeably, but generally speaking, the nafs refers to the soul or the essence of a person when that person is alive, awake, alert, and connected to their body, their physical self. And the ruh, of course, we are not alive without a ruh, our soul, but in the sense that, the soul is something eternal. It existed before, it was placed into the body. And also when the body dies, it continues to exist, right? And it's extracted from the body. So I am not a scholar. We leave the discussion at that level, but that just gives us a sense of how complicated, I guess, the terminology is and how rich the terminology is. But it gives us a sense of what we're talking about, hopefully, inshallah. And then in the Quran, there are 3 adjectives that are used to describe the nafs. I mean, we could see them as 3 categories of people or states of being, or 3 different states that a person could be at any particular time. So they are, the first one is, in English we say the inciting soul, or an-nafs al-ammara bil-su' or bis-su'. So it is the self or the soul that incites the human being to do wrong things or to do evil. You have the self-reproaching soul, an-nafs al-lawwama, which is a soul which makes mistakes, but not happily, not willfully. It makes mistakes and has a conscience and realizes that it's wrong and holds itself to account and and feels bad and guilt and those sorts of things, that type of a soul. And then you have the tranquil soul, and again, a very deep, a very rich term. Tranquil is just one way of describing it. An-nafs al-mutma'inna. And a lot of us are familiar with this term because it comes from Surah Al-Fajr. But subhanAllah, if we have a look in the Quran, how these terms or these references to the nafs or to the soul are used. So the first one, an-nafs al-amara, indeed the soul is ever inclined to evil. That type of soul that's ever inclined to evil. And I elaborate a little bit here, where our nafs, when our nafs has command over us, when our nafs has sovereignty over us, when we do whatever our desires tell us to do, and we don't second guess it, we don't second think it, we just live according to what pleases us. This is a soul which the nafs is in, or a person in which their nafs is in command. Not the person, but the nafs is in command. Does that make sense? Yeah? And then, and there was a note here in one of the articles that I read, which I thought was a very accurate description of a modern day, phrase that people use, do whatever makes you happy. Do whatever pleases you, right? Very, very common phrase. Do whatever your heart desires. And this is really a description of this type of a nafs that is in command. The nafs is in command. The nafs is number one, right? No other considerations there. And then the self-reproaching soul. I think, Allahu A'lam, I think this is the category that most human beings fall into. Well, I hope that we have a sense of guilt and, self-reproach. So the nafs that self-incriminates, it reproaches itself, it feels bad, it feels guilty, it feels remorse, it feels regret. It does sometimes listen and obey the enticement, but then comes back and reflects and says, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have done that. And so it's a self-reproaching soul. And then the third category, or the third, not category, but the third state of the nafs, or an adjective or description that Allah uses of a nafs in the Quran, is an-nafsul mutma'inna. So translated as the tranquil soul. And that is a soul who only desires what pleases Allah. So a soul that only desires what pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That it doesn't have the desire to sin, doesn't have the desire to do other than what pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when you reach that state, you have a tranquil soul. And of course for us as believers that makes sense, that when you reach that state, you will not be in this internal turmoil, in this constant, cycle of guilt and why did I do that, and how could I have done that, or I really regret that type of a cycle. You have a feeling of safety, of security with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're not at you're not in some sort of antagonistic relationship with doing the right thing. So here in this explanation, it is a soul that is content with the hukm or the ruling of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah Almighty. There is nothing else that makes them happy. And then I've also highlighted at the bottom, so its contentment lies in that which Allah Almighty is happy and pleased with. So of course this is a state that if we're not in it, we should be striving to achieve it. And I hope, inshallah ta'ala, that by this reminder and through this discussion, by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the will and decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that if we're not in it, we can be closer to that very soon, and that we can achieve that in our life. Allahumma ameen, before we pass away. Am I repeating that? And I thought this little graphic was a good summary of the three. I'll pause there for 1 second. So you've got three sort of states of the nafs. Before I push on, does anybody have any questions at this point about the three different types of nafs? It's okay, you can save questions at the end as well, but I thought I'll just pause just in case anybody's sitting there going, okay, I don't quite get something. Are we good to move on? Yep, okay. All right. So then it's important then to think about, why do we fall into sin? Or another way of phrasing this question is, why are we sometimes overpowered by our nafs? In other words, we know something is wrong, we know we shouldn't do it, but we do it anyway. if we do that, does it mean we don't believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? We don't believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's, reward and punishment? We don't believe that there's a life hereafter? Is that what it means when we fall into sin? What do you think?
This means is like something hadith in Nafs inside the our body that tell us that something we should be not doing, but then we get blame after that to blame ourselves, like we feel guilty or not.
Mm-hmm.
That's we call hadith in Nafs. That's
Mm-hmm.
what I understand.
Mm-hmm.
But instead of that, I believe Allah is going to forgive us until we get to
Yeah.
correct ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we know as Muslims that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most merciful and accepts the repentance of the believer. So we have that avenue. But we don't sin taking advantage of that, do we? We don't think, oh, it's okay, Allah's going to forgive me. We don't make that assumption. Yes? We'll talk more about why. Why do we fall into sin? I've put a couple of things, I've just pulled out a few things that contribute to this state of our being, to this condition of the believer. Now here we're not talking about somebody who doesn't believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why do they fall into sin? That might be an easier question to answer. That might be an easier question to answer. Does anyone want to offer an answer for that? Yeah, absolutely. Could be from ignorance. Yes. No accountability. Yeah. There's no criteria really. I mean, these days everything is self-made. We make up what's right and wrong, don't we? And it's constantly changing, right? Okay. But for somebody who professes to believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we sin. We fall into sin. And there are several reasons for that. One major reason is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us as sinners. Sounds odd. It sounds odd, right? Why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala create us to sin and then punish us, right? If you put it that way, it might even seem like an injustice, do you think? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made us to sin. So when we sin, we appreciate why we shouldn't. Usually, we learn a few lessons along the way, yeah? We realize how needy we are of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We can't rely on ourselves for anything, really. At the end of the day, we are powerless, we are helpless, right? We have no choice if we are believers and we have any kind of intellect but to turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because the alternative in terms of what's going to happen is terrible when we think about the fact that we are here for a short period of time. We live, we will die, that's inevitable. And then what? So there's no option of giving up, right? And saying, oh, this is all too hard. Let me just live my life however I please. For a believer, right? For others, there are, suicide, drugs, alcohol. There are very numerous avenues of getting out, but it's not really an escape, is it? For the believer, there's no option but to get back up and keep trying to do the right thing according to the criteria that we know for what is right and what is wrong. Yes? Now, why does it happen? And understanding, how and why we get into these things and these mistakes and these sins and these wrongs is really important, and it's really empowering, right? Of course, one of the reasons we know, and usually we know the story of the beginning of creation of Adam alayhi salam and Hawa, and the instructions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them not to approach, the tree. And who was there? Our friend? Our friend or our enemy? Our enemy, Shaitan, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him one rule. Gosh, we have so many now, right? One rule, don't eat from the tree. And the human being, by our nature, what do we do? We just don't have any patience, do we? And we get curious and we've just got to try it. We've just got to know. myself said something to me and it sounded good at the time, right? So I did it. I fell into that, right? So Shaitan convinced them that it was a good idea to eat from the tree, yeah? And then what happened? And we know. And here we are on earth, and we are all in a state of test. And we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created life and death as a test. And from that test, He will distinguish between us. Yes? What we do with what Allah's given us. Our obedience, yes. That's one aspect. Starts with belief, believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And action, intention, and all of those things, right? So Shaitan has been promised hell as his ultimate abode. And so he's made a promise to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he will sit. Where will Shaitan sit? He will sit on the straight path. He will sit on the straight path and he will wait. For who? For the disbelievers? They're easy. Because why? At the moment, in the state that they're, if you're in a state of disbelief, at the moment, in that state, you're not heading to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or to success, ultimate success, right? Shaitan wants to wait for the people who are on that path. And sometimes we say, gee, why are Muslims so difficult to deal with? Subhanallah, right? Why do they do these things? I just don't understand it. We have guidance, we know what's right and wrong, and yet, sometimes you see some of the worst behavior among Muslims, right? Shaitan is very active, very aggressive towards somebody who wants to walk towards who? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So understand that. That's the first thing. Understand that. This battle is not, it is within ourselves, but there are other players in this, And the Shaitan is a, it is a force that we can't even see. So sometimes when we think that we are having a dialogue in our own mind about something, Shaitan is there and he's been there for a long time and he knows your weaknesses and he knows everything about you. And he knows what buttons to press as well. If you're having an argument with your mother or your father or your husband or whoever it is, right, he knows what annoys you and says exactly the right words to trigger anger and all those emotions that will make us fall into disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and sin, right? So understanding that, Shaitan is sitting on the straight path. He's waiting for you and me. Now we know from our Prophet ﷺ that every single human being that was created has a devil that's assigned to him or her, right? A qareen. Every single person, there's a devil. We have angels with us and there's a devil with us. Be aware of that. Be aware of that. Sometimes when you're just really being pulled towards something and your mind knows that it's wrong, understand who's present with you. And that's, another important bit of knowledge. Sisi, you have a question on your face. Thinking. Okay. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, He subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us, Shaitan is an open enemy to you. He's an enemy to you. He only invites his followers to become inmates of the fire. That's all. Another thing that Shaitan does, and sometimes even within ourselves we're really good at doing this because of the way we've been conditioned. If you think about what consumes a lot of people's time and has done since, I guess, the television was invented, 123 years ago or whenever that was, right? Hollywood, movies, Disney, cartoons, fairy tales, make-believe, whatever it is. We are, and Shaitan is, very good at creating illusions and delusion. Illusions and delusion. For example, I always use this one because I know that as a young woman growing up in Australia, one thing that I know really had a big impact on me, and it sounds silly, right? If I say it now as a woman who's nearly 50, as I say it, it sounds really silly, but it's the truth. I remember it very vividly. I grew up really thinking that relationships were like Cinderella. You know, the story of Cinderella, that was my standard, right? The prince comes, puts on the shoe, and, you know, opens the carriage door and all of this stuff, right? That's you know, what's depicted, not real life. Hollywood, fairy tales, you know, happily ever after, you know, two people without any problems in the world, you know, all the solutions, that kind of thing, right? So, and Shaitan is very good at, and you know what happens when we live in delusion? And maybe this is why so many marriages today, they don't last. I think it could be part of the problem. And a lot of our young sisters, subhanAllah, you know, or he's, you know, they'll say things like, he's not my ideal, you know, man, we weren't compatible and this and this. And what were you expecting? What were you expecting out of marriage? Hollywood, Cinderella? Because that's not going to happen. And you know how many sisters, subhanAllah, by my age, you'll see, subhanAllah, how many sisters said, get rid of him, okay? And you know how the grass is always greener on the other side, or, you know, you can always get better, you can do better, sister, and you'll see all these sisters going on social media and saying that to the sisters. Sometimes it's true, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying divorce is halal in Islam, don't get me wrong, you know, but I just see the way young people, particularly young women, talk, you know, and their expectation. It's not real. It's not real. I mean, yeah, have standards and, you know, all of those things. But be real, because if you are not realistic and you're delusional, what happens? You are constantly in a state of discontent, dissatisfied with everything. You know those people that are just unhappy with everything. They can't see the good in anything. You know, you go into a public bathroom or the masjid and, oh, where's this and where's that? And, you know, no paper towel in the bathroom, surely. You know, this kind of mentality, and they're miserable people, you know. I was a school principal in Melbourne not so long ago, over the last 5 years, right? And one day I actually used the staff bathroom. And I mean, this is, you know, a bit of a funny story, but it happened to be in the cubicle when two staff members were out there talking, right? And I did not want to get out of the cubicle because I was so embarrassed by what they were saying. And I didn't want them to see that the principal was coming out of the because they would have been mortified, right? But what were they saying? They were swearing and carrying on about how, you know, how the bathroom needed renovating and, you know, and how it didn't have, you know, little perfumed soaps like the new building and blah, blah. And I just thought, oh, gee, you know, of all the problems in the world, you know, and there they were, you know, making each other miserable. For what? But this is what happens, right? Delusion and illusion, subhanAllah, okay? So don't be deluded. Don't be deluded. And one other thing that's probably good for me to say at this point is there's a difference between happiness and contentment. Think about that, sisters. There's a big difference between happiness. Happiness is a fleeting emotion. It's not a permanent state of being. Happiness is a temporary thing. You might laugh at something, and for that moment you feel happy, okay? Somebody takes drugs, and for those few moments, I don't know how, but apparently they might feel happy, or they might be forgetting other problems that they have temporarily. It's a temporary state of being. And the funny thing is, as human beings, and anybody that studied psychology, look at marketing, look at, you know, social media, look at it all. The pursuit of happiness is what, you know, again, big companies, whatever it is, they have human beings trying to attain, right? There's always something exciting around the corner. If you get that new phone, you're going to be happy. If you get that outfit or that car or whatever it is, and then if you do get it, then you go, oh gosh, okay, it's got a scratch on it now. It's not new anymore. I've driven it down the street. Damn, it gets old really fast, right? And so they keep on chasing and striving, right? But it's not, you know, it's not an attainable state of being. Contentment is something different. Contentment, being in a state of gratitude, being in a state of awe of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like subhanAllah, right? My eyes. Or subhanAllah, I woke up today if I, look to my left or my right, I see my children with me, alive and well. I have clothes on my back, alhamdulillah, and I feel a state of contentment, satisfaction with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Big difference. People chasing happiness, let me let you in on a really big secret. They're miserable. How do I know? How do I know people who chase happiness are miserable? How do I know? What do you think? Look at the wealthiest people in the world. Committing suicide, on drugs, actors, actresses, millionaires, billionaires. Are they happy? They have all the material things, right? They've got all of that. That's the stuff that Shaitan tries to get you and me to strive after and occupy our time with. The 2-story, the 3-story house, the mansion, all of that stuff. But believe me, at the end of the day, when you go to sleep on a bed, it's a bed. When you drive in a car, it gets you from A to B. When you eat an egg in a mansion or an egg at my house, they taste the same. Maybe. Maybe. But an egg is an egg, right? But we get deluded to think that there's this thing called happiness that we need to attain in this life. Don't be deluded by that. Those people who are chasing that are most definitely not at peace and will not find peace in that pursuit. That's 100% guaranteed. And if we open our eyes, we can see it very plainly and very clearly. Okay? It's not in beauty, it's not in money, it's not in any of those things. Just look at anybody that has those things and tell me if they're happy. Your answer is very clear. Okay. Human beings are created impatient. This is another attribute of our being that leads us to fall into sin. We just don't have the patience to wait for the good at the end of the road, right? Okay, so just moving on. I thought it would be good just to quickly remind ourselves of some of the major sins in Islam. And there are many major sins in Islam. These are just like the top ones. Just a reminder. So what have we got? Shirk. Shirk is, of course, a massive topic on its own. And a lot of people think, oh, okay, shirk, don't make anything equal to Allah. I'm good with that one. But there are so many ways to put things as equal to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without us even realizing. Like showing off. Showing off in our worship, for example, standing there and beautifying our prayer because other people can see us. Putting the people, in essence, above Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? When you're doing an act of worship for other than Allah, you are doing what? It's a type of a shirk, a hidden type of a shirk. Yeah, right? So these are not simple things, but witchcraft, magic, these sorts of things, murder, of course, consuming an orphan's wealth, consuming interest, and of course paying interest is a major sin. Slandering chaste women. Accusing a woman of committing adultery when she hasn't done so. These are major sins. All right, we're nearly there. I thought it would be useful if we talk for a moment about habits, how habits are formed, just from a more of a scientific point of view, just briefly. And I thought this was a great, I don't usually quote Aristotle, but, I saw that and I thought, no, you know what, it's worth quoting. It's worth quoting. We are what we repeatedly do. That's true. So therefore, excellence is not an act, but a habit. We'll leave that for you to ponder. Habits. Now, I want you to, inshallah, use this bit of information to empower yourself moving forward, inshallah. Habits form when new behaviors become automatic. So a habit is when a new behavior is automatic. In other words, you don't really need to think about it before you do it. Is that okay? You kind of just do it automatically. I'll give you a good example. You know when you've got Instagram on your phone and it goes ping, what do? You quickly pick your phone up and check because there's a notification, right? That's a very automatic. You don't even think about it like, oh, my phone just went off, and you just quickly, I thought I'd just use that example. Not that it applies to anybody here, right? But, you know. But this is the crucial bit. They become automatic and are enacted with minimum conscious awareness. That's because the behavior patterns we repeat most often are literally etched into our neural pathways. Just want you to think about that. The way our brain has been created. And of course, this information that, you know, that we have about the neural pathways in the brain, or how our brain functions and operates, and how we function as human beings. You can see with Islam that, subhanAllah, if you look at, for example, the month of Ramadan, you know, the 30 days of fasting, and the purpose behind certain things, the 5 daily prayers, this routine and this habit is meant, you know, to serve a particular protective purpose and beneficial purpose to the human being, right? But if we don't do things in the proper way, then we don't reap that benefit. But it is there. Now, how habits are formed. Usually you have some sort of a cue, and from that it triggers you to do a certain action, and then from that action you get some type of a reward or pleasurable feeling, right? I gave you the example of you know, ping, the notification, if you've got it switched on your phone, you hear a noise, that triggers you to go over, pick up your phone, check your messages, receive some information. Oh, 5 people liked my last post, and then from that you feel good, right? So you've got this, and that seems so simplistic, right? We never consciously think about what we're actually doing. But subhanAllah, look at how we are programmed and being programmed, right? So we're in this constant cycle. And why did I think it was important to point this out to us in a discussion around nafs and habit, you know, habits, particularly, you know, bad habits or things that are destructive for us, right? It's just to understand, okay, well, how am I going to break away from that? How am I going to change certain things in my life that I'm literally now wired into doing? And I feel uncomfortable if I try to not do that now, and wonder why I'm feeling uncomfortable or anxious, you know, when the notification goes off, or when it's been an hour or 2 hours and I haven't checked my phone, or whatever it is that you are in that routine or that habit of doing. You know, for some people it's coffee, right? Or something like that. You know, we have all sorts of addictions. Everybody, it's diverse, right? Whatever it is, but it follows that same pattern, right? So, okay, how do we break out of that? How do we, you know, it is not easy. That's the first thing I've got to say. It is not easy. I think over 88% of you know, people who attempt to make major changes in their lives fail, right? It's not easy. A very, very small fraction of people actually go, okay, that's it. I'm going to change my life, my whole lifestyle, my routine, my way of living, my way of being, doing the things I do repetitively, okay, like our sins, and just stop it, right? Whether it's smoking, whether it's whatever it is, backbiting, whatever it is that is, you know, a habit that you're struggling with. So it is important to understand the mechanism, okay, the way, you know, biologically, you know, it functions. Now, I thought it was also important just to, you know, throw out there some of the things that are affecting us as human beings, particularly as believers, right? Number one, I think, you know, it's the epidemic of our time. It is heartbreaking, actually, to see that everybody can see that everybody else is addicted to a device except themselves. So if you go to somebody, oh, you know, you should maybe work on that, maybe try and, you know, oh, look at yourself. You know, or you're worse than me, or, you know, you see your kids fighting, or, you know, they see you doing work on your laptop and they're like, oh, you're on there more than me. I don't think so. Well, what I'm doing on there and what you're doing in there are completely different things, right? And it matters, but it's a big problem. Like literally, if you drive around, you know, you're going from A to B and you just see somebody at the bus stop, or you go to the shopping centre, you go to the library, everybody is like you know, nearly everybody is like a zombie attached to a device, right? And then it's even more heart-wrenching when you're in the shopping centre and you see the 1-year-old with the iPad or on mummy's phone, because that's the only thing that's going to pacify the child, right? Even though the brain hasn't developed yet. And the child is just, being constantly overstimulated. And then we wonder why, and particularly somebody like myself in the field of teaching, or anybody in the medical field would know, why we have a classroom full of kids that don't want to sit there and learn, right? Or can't learn, in reality. It's very difficult for them. Their whole wiring has been changed and affected. And this is a reality. And then what do we think? So sometimes we think the solution is bring more devices. It's terrible. And then they're off task and they're on the device gaming or something in the back of the classroom. Oh, we have technology in our classrooms, 1-to-1. It's great, right? But it's not. Big problem. Big problem. Overeating, epidemic, but again, we have to understand why it happens. I say this one because I had a lifelong struggle with my eating. I had bulimia at 19, and I never understood the sort of the physiological, factors behind that, and the emotional factors behind that, and other things, right? Smoking, drugs, alcohol, big problem in our community. Gambling. Music is another one, often not touched, but it's a problem. Why is it a problem? Is it a problem? Is that a problem? No, I want to ask you the question. Why is music a problem? Is it a problem? Isn't it a good thing? It's good distraction, right? Affects the emotions, yeah? Harmless, you think? What do you think, really? Sisi?
Yeah, usually the lyric and take us out of the remembrance.
Exactly right. So, remember, if we go back, who's our enemy? Shaitan. What's his aim, goal, motivation? Take us off the straight path. What is the path that we are hoping to be on? Path where? To Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How do we get there? We have to be connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have to be in touch with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when we are connected and when we are in touch with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, constantly remembering Him, constantly turning back to Him, repenting, seeking knowledge, reading His book, reading the life of our Prophet ﷺ, when we are constantly in that pursuit of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah will be our protector. Allah will be our eyes, our ears, whatever we do. Subhanallah, right? So music, what? What will that do? And then someone will say, okay, what about nasheed? Right? Because shaitan has found a way around, everything. Because everything that's wrong, shaitan knows, the believer knows, if it's black and white, we're going to probably, hopefully stay away from it. Let's make it a bit shady. Let's make it a bit grey, right? And, it's interesting. If you have a look at the nasheed today, they all imitate songs and music. They're not even like, traditional. Some nasheed without any, some are good, for kids to learn, alif, ba, ta, whatever it is, without music, that sort of thing, within the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They can be useful. Don't get me wrong. But, we get roped into things, and I think we can understand that shaitan has these strategies. He doesn't come straight at you. It comes in different ways, and we have to be aware of that. All right. Oh, the last one kind of gets me, especially now with what's going on in Palestine. Because I feel like, and I say this about, even, those closest to me. Unless you've experienced hardship, unless you've experienced going without. And I mean things which we take for granted. Water, food, medicine, shelter, all of those things. Then I don't think you can really estimate the value of those things. So when I look at our kids here in Australia, and food that's chucked on the ground and taps that are left running, and kids, you send a kid to make wudu and the tap is it's just like pouring out, and you're just like, no value for those things, right? Subhanallah. All right, moving on. So how do we conquer our nafs is the last one, the $1 million question, I guess they say. Remember I said before that the way we're created as human beings and the way that our brains are wired and such, that once we fall into a particular habit, it's very difficult to break out of that, right? And you see this with, people that have drug problems, drug addiction, whatever it is, whatever the addiction is. It's very, very hard, except when you have the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Because with the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the difficult becomes easy. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying to change is easy. You have to struggle and you have to strive. And you might fail and you might have to struggle and strive again and a million times, and it doesn't matter how long it takes, right? But the first thing that we as believers have to put in our mind is not what you hear, these life coaches or whatever it is, or people, saying to other people about how to achieve change and, success and this sort of thing. It's not believing in yourself as such or thinking that you're so great that you can do anything. We are absolutely powerless to do anything, even breathe without the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Understanding that is really the first step. Understanding that all power, our destiny, everything is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Understanding that is your first key, right? Understand that. You're not going to overcome anything, because of the amount of money you have, or, whatever it is. Whatever it is. Take whatever resource you like. You will not succeed without the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's number one. We have to absolutely turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and seek His help and seek His forgiveness and seek His aid in whatever it is we want to achieve. That's number one. And remember as well that this struggle against the self, it's not something that, you're going to achieve this completeness and then you're good and you're so good and for the rest of your life you are just this perfect Muslim. No, it is a lifelong struggle, and it most likely will continue until the moment you take your last breath. You will be in that struggle. Even at that moment, you will have suggestions and you will have thoughts and you will have to make choices until your last. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created life and death to test you and me, right? And no one says, I believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and isn't tested. It's the exact opposite. The people who say they believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and who do believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are tested more than anybody else. But understanding that, those people who are in the biggest test are in the greatest blessing, subhanAllah. Us, I speak for myself, who has food and resources and eyesight and parents and children and my health and whatever it is, my shelter and all of these things, I am in a massive test. But again, we think of our brothers and sisters in Palestine, okay? They have nothing. They are much more fortunate than me, than you and I, subhanAllah. From the eyes of somebody who doesn't understand the purpose of this life and its, the wisdom behind its creation, they might look at the people in Palestine and think, oh, the poor people, that's just terrible. It's terrible. It's wrong what's happening, don't get me wrong. But those people I envy in the sense that, what will they be questioned about? What am I going to be standing there on the Day of Judgment answering to compared to them? When they're doing their salah on time, in a broken building without wudu, without clean water, without toilet facilities, without anything, when they're standing there and they've just lost family members, children, all of it, and they're fulfilling their ibadah in that state. And here we are struggling, to get up for Fajr, because I slept too late, because I was on my phone, or something ridiculous like that. Who is in the better situation? From that perspective, from the believer's perspective, we understand that is a blessing for them. We are, in a more difficult situation in some sense when we talk about the struggle against the self. When you have nothing, the struggle is a little less burdensome. When you have everything, you have a bit more responsibility on your shoulders, right? Subhanallah. So just a few things that come to my mind that I thought, let's remind ourselves. Obviously, first and foremost, believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Without that, you're not going to conquer anything. Knowledge is essential. This dialogue we have in our head every day, this pulling that we get, and these suggestions and these discussions, and do I do this, should I do that, is it right and wrong? What are we going to determine without knowledge of the Quran and the Sunnah? Where's the roadmap? Where are we going to go to? Intention, of course, every action is by its intention. It needs to be for who? For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Reflection constantly. Repentance constantly. Submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Trusting that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the best plan. Not like, that didn't go the way I wanted it to, therefore, and then you're in this state of heedlessness. Good environment. Where do you put yourself? Don't think when you die you're going to say to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I couldn't do the right thing because I was in such and such a place, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that wasn't the earth of Allah spacious enough that you could go somewhere and worship Him properly? Why put yourself in certain situations? Your companions. It was the people that I was with, they were backbiting, they were doing this, they weren't wearing hijab, they were wearing makeup, whatever it is. Why were you with them? Change your situation. Change your situation and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will help you to change, right? And also remember that don't just focus on one aspect of your being. We are a soul, we are a body, we have an intellect. Look after all of these things because they're interconnected. If you are just sitting there studying religion all day but you're extremely unhealthy and you're not looking after the other amanat that you have, one will ultimately affect the other, psychologically, or your sleep, or whatever it is. You need to look after every aspect of your being. Think about your purpose. I think our time is up. Inshallah. But I was just going to share a few hadith along the lines of the points that I just gave, and that was it. Constantly making dhikr. Align your life with your purpose. Allah created us to worship Him. That's it. Align your life with that purpose. And then you'll be on the path to success, inshallah. Jazakallah khair. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive me for any mistakes that I made.